is it?
It is a gas station that is like if a Walmart and a Cracker Barrel had a baby. So they've got like the country store, and they've got and also like a Golden Corral too, probably, because they have all these hot foods in there that you can get. And like I literally, people were fighting over the brisket sandwiches. The last time I was there, I was getting that. People go there for that, but I mean they were gone as soon as they came out of the
and like 100 pumps outside,
yeah,
like the most pumps you've ever seen in your life.
And they don't allow big trucks. Like they don't allow the 18-wheelers. So it's only like, families and individual cars and things like that. But yeah, no, it's it's wild.
Like people book trips around the Buc-ee's stops, right?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So it's in Georgia now.
Yeah. It's a gas station, but it's a gas station chain, but it's kind of like Pilot, but for like not truckers.
Okay. Got it. My dad moved down to Georgia permanently. He's in Brunswick, St. Simon's Island area.
Love that. Tell him to check out the Pinball Palace in Brunswick. It's a lot of fun.
Okay.
If he's into that. They probably have machines back from when he remembers being in like the arcade or something, because they've got a huge collection like through the ages.
That's sweet.
I've never seen that many pinball.
Like game places with all the old arcades and pinballs and stuff. Yeah, that's awesome. I used to go to one in downtown Houston. I wonder if it's still there. It was like across the street from me, and it was just, I don't know, unique kind of place, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think those are like people's collections that they just sort of allow you to use, right? Like somebody owns that and is passionate.
Yeah. We have a little like gaming conference here in Atlanta every year, where they had a historical computer. It's the Southern Fried Gaming Expo, but they had like a historical computer museum. They had the guy who's like, I think the Miss Pac-Man champion, or like, found like the infinite glitch in it. Like they have all kinds of folks. And then they also have like a pinball machine. It's so funny because these people that like bring their collections, they're just running around like medics across this conference hall of just pinball machines, but fixing them. There's just like a whole team of pinball medics.
Like you're playing pinball, it breaks. You raise your hand. I need a medic.
Yeah, pretty much.
Man down.
Yeah. Yeah, no. I mean, it's cool to see people so passionate about like fixing those things and maintaining, and like, because I think in society these days a lot of things are disposable. So it's cool to see people really, they're not even really doing it for the money. They're doing it for the love of the game.
Yeah. Yeah. There's this whole movement. There's this credo, the fix it credo. People are really passionate. They like swear by this credo. Like if something breaks, I will try everything in my power to get it to work again. That kind of stuff. In fact, we were at the beach the other day. We saw this beautiful motorcycle. It was a Portuguese brand, and it just stood out, like, because it was like from the freaking 40s or 50s. Like it just stood out from all the Kawasaki's and Hondas and stuff. And there's just like this thing that's like so unique, and he put, I don't know, $3,000 into getting a new motor and getting all the chrome redone. And he was so proud to talk about it. I think that's what you miss, right?
Yeah, it's cool to see. I mean, I would say, where I'm from, the fix it movement, from where I'm from, we just call that being a redneck. Like, because
normal.
Yeah, like, because I grew up really rural. I mean, maybe not really, really rural, but I grew up fairly rural. And like, so, the closest gas station was 10 or 15 minutes from my house. The closest, grocery store was 30 minutes or more from my house. The closest Walmart was 45 minutes away. It's really, I've realized, how that trains you early on, especially in my family. My dad was the only one working and the only one that could drive. So like you had to be really efficient with your trips, because like you might not get another chance at it for another week. And it's like that kind of, having to work with that kind of fault tolerance where things aren't close by. You can't just go pop into anywhere a couple miles away like I am now and go get it. You really have to plan a lot of your life ahead. And I think those are honestly really good skills that a lot of folks don't end up learning.
Yeah. Well,
I think we've talked, like I could totally relate. Christina's on a grocery run with the 4 kids right now. It's 35 minutes away, right? Like same kind of game. Like you plan your food, right?
Yeah.
And then like I fix everything now. I also have older cars because I can fix them, right?
The ones with like the new brains in them, I can't. Those I can't work with. But yeah, no, I've torn out engines, transmissions, like all kinds of stuff. My first job ever was in construction, working with my dad.
Nice. That's what led you to email.
It made me realize also we installed septic tanks and sometimes had to work on existing ones. It was a pretty shitty job. So that made
Literally.
me realize, yeah, I would much rather do other things. But it gave me like kind of the technical and engineering like inclination, you know.
Yeah.
Well, I want to start us off with a bombshell question here. So we talked last week, LB, and you were talking about the experiment you ran with Ty Lopez brands. I mean, billion emails a month, Pier 1, Dress Barn, when you were consulting with them, and you discovered something that contradicts everything that we were told about email marketing. And you proved, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that Mo email is Mo money. I think that was your exact quote.
Yep, that sounds like me. Mo email, Mo money.
Can you walk? But you didn't think so originally. So I was wondering, could you walk us through what you discovered and why a lot of e-commerce brands are kind of leaving money on the table by not seeing this truth that you uncovered? Like, how did you get there?
Yeah. So, how I got there was I was working directly with, I was basically leading the email division there, and I was working, at least the infrastructure. I was responsible for infrastructure and deliverability. So the platforms we sent from and making sure they were technically sound and properly configured. And, really, I got brought in. I started with one of the brands, they picked me up on Upwork, and I was sorting that out. We actually increased my time there because they found my spend very valuable. I was able to get them in inboxes, and that made them lots more money. So then I got pulled into another brand because it wasn't warming up as quickly as they wanted it to. So I got that warmed up, and then they acquired Pier 1 and said, hey, you're going to be sending the day after old Pier 1 goes offline. So I did that. And then one day, Dr. Alex Mayer comes up and he's like, hey, like we bought a 20 million like person list. Like, why are we only sending to 4.5 million? I said, well, these were the people that re-engaged of the folks that have been emailed and engaged in like the last year on old Pier 1, like the prior business that owned it. And he was like, well, where's the rest of the list? So I did some analytics. I looked and I found, well, about 11 million of them were unsubscribed because it was the historical list since like forever collection. And then I, dug in deeper and, found that, yeah, about 11 million were unsubscribed, suppressed, for hard bouncing, whatever reason, right? But then there were like a number of contacts that they just hadn't contacted in a period of time. And I just, sat there going, man, this isn't going to work. I was wrong though. We actually I said, let me come up with the best strategy I can to reactivate them. And honestly, we were running hard and fast. We were really running like a startup. We were running with much smaller staffs than these brands had typically enjoyed. So we had to be really efficient. And what we did was honestly just take and chop up that like disengaged list. We actually used a technology called Audience Point to rank the people like 1 through 5 stars, how engaged they were with the email channel in general. And we just started working our way through the 5s, the 4s, 3s, the 1s. And ultimately, we were able to reactivate like 2 million subscribers this way. We took like 3 or 4 successive passes through it. And honestly, we just kept sending more and more aggressively. And like, I kept getting more and more pressure. And I said, you know what? I'm going to prove to these people data science, because all the prevailing logic in deliverability is, you got to, sunset people that aren't engaging, don't censor them, whatever. Well, I was like, I'm just going to prove it's true data scientifically because we have a big enough database of event data and days in operation, all of this. And I found the Pearson analysis coefficient. It produces a coefficient between 1 and -1 that tells you what the affinity is between 2 variables, basically. So we looked at send volume and total revenue dollars. We were trying to optimize everything for total revenue. We actually even looked at total volume of opens, total volume of clicks, total volume of conversions. And we found interesting insights like all the way down that chain, actually. But what we found, we looked at 6 months worth of data, daily email sending a campaign pretty much every single day. We looked at that 6 months worth of data across 8 brands, 1 billion emails each of those months, and found Mo email, Mo money in 5 out of the 8 cases. And especially with our largest brands, our biggest lists, we did find for a couple of the smaller brands, they were just ever so slightly into the negative returns on total revenue for sending. So we stepped that back a little bit and they returned to like, okay, we are now maximizing total revenue dollars. We're not burning the list. So they stepped back, they're sending aggression like just a little bit, and total revenue improved over time. And so that was really it. And honestly, I reran the experiment because I didn't believe it. I was like, what? No, we must have done something wrong. This can't be right. And, looked, every line and ran through it. And no, the algorithm worked. the data science algorithm worked the way it was supposed to. It graphed the line of best fit between these, did its like data science mathematical magic that please, don't ask me to try to explain that because I probably will just start dribbling blood from my nose because it's insane. But it's fundamentally magic at some point, wave magic data algorithm wand, results come out. And yeah, so I turned out I was wrong. And I said, well, I'm going to change my mind then. And I'm going to act on this information. And we sent really aggressively. And it actually made the company, quite a lot of revenue. Total revenue dollars, which helped us to be successful during the pandemic. We even found an interesting insight where clicks weren't actually as highly correlated with revenue as opens were, which seems odd. That's further down the funnel. And then we come to find out that there were issues with the page links being put in the emails, like sorting all the sold out products in the sale collection to the top. So people would click it, think they missed the sale. And that was the neat way. I've actually dozens of times or more found little nuggets of wisdom for the business in the email data. And also like AOL, we found AOL subscribers for Dress Barn, which makes sense, was targeted like 55 plus women. Found that, AOL was outsizedly profitable. So we were able to go like, hey, go buy ads on AOL's like website. I know that sounds crazy advice in 2020, right? It's unintuitive, but that's where your core demographic lives.
Yeah. I just read that AOL is actually sunsetting their dial-up this year. Did you know that was still going on?
I actually did.
Amazing.
It's in some places, it's like, because especially I did corporate internal support. And this
That's
was
what I'm on.
pixel by pixel.
Yeah, right.
But, when I worked corporate internal support for State Farm, in some cases, dial-up was like the only option in some really rural areas. Because you think about it, if you insure a state with home insurance and auto insurance, you might have to go anywhere in that state to adjust the claim.
Yeah, that's true.
So in some places, that's kind of the only option. But
wow,
you're gonna wait.
So this is it's a big deal this year then.
I guess they're like banking on Starlink or something like that now. I don't know.
That is probably Starlink's probably. I will say that is the thing. Yeah, now Starlink can just beam an internet anywhere you need to get it. So
yeah, and fry your egg too. So you get that benefit. Let's come back to this insight you got, which is, for any e-commerce marketers watching this, what is the sweet spot for email frequency that e-commerce brands should be targeting for, or how do they know that they've crossed the line? Like, what is too much?
So I will say what is too much frequency, the way that I typically track this is by tracking my unsubscribe rate. Like and spam complaints. Because typically, people will spam complain for one of a few reasons. Either they just don't remember signing up. You sent them something they don't like. Even if they know they signed up, that's what I call a spite complaint instead of a spam complaint. Like debt collectors run into that a lot. They know they owe that debt and they're just mad that you reminded them. The challenging space to work in an email. But yeah, I would say, it depends by brand too. Because like I said, in the instance of our brands, we were treating them all the same, but the same send cadence that worked for some of the send cadence that worked for some of them was too much for others and not enough for our biggest brands. So it really is, you have to rely on your own, like basically always measure yourself against yourself and always look at your specific customer because there's so many variances. I have to give like the canonical deliverability answer, which is it depends. It depends on your business model. So I have a client right now in supplements. And they sell at minimum 30-day supplies. So it doesn't make sense for them to email somebody within like 15 days after they purchased. But then after that, you might email them honestly, we emailed our subscribers like every day with Pier 1. Sometimes multiple times a day. Like if we had a particularly good sale, we'd hit like the reopener or the unopeners and like honestly get really good results. But basically, I will say this, the path of least resistance to getting into the mailbox providers is sending the same or a rather consistent volume every single day. Like the more you are causing spikes on the graph, the harder that is for the mailbox providers to digest because it just makes them ask more questions. So I would say, like my best advice is to send a fairly consistent volume every day. And I would say this, you want to make sure you're hitting everyone in your list at least every 30 days for like hygiene concerns to make sure you find out if their mailbox is full or if they left that job, if you're in the B2B space, things like that. You want to make sure you're hitting people. I frankly see, I honestly don't know what I can say is too much, but I would say it depends on like the burn rate at which you're burning your list. We actually had an interesting incident where one of my teammates accidentally sent from the support email address. They sent our marketing email from the support email address. And we're pretty sure we had a good amount of primary tab emails. Because our open rate went through the roof, our conversion rate went through the roof, but so did our complaints and our unsubscribes. And then that also caused downstream effects where the support emails started having trouble inboxing from just like Google Workspace and Zendesk. So I don't recommend that. I would say, trying to force yourself into the primary tab, definitely something I don't recommend. But what I would say is to really look at your unsubscribe rate. If you start cresting above 0.1 and you're sending very aggressively, I would consider backing off on the cadence. So that's if you get above a 0.1 unsubscribe rate. And I'll say, it really does come down to like data science, because you want to look at like the long haul of things and go, am I improving or degrading the long-term profitability of my business? So it depends on a lot of variables, like what is the LTV of your average subscriber? What product do you sell? How often do people rebuy? What is the price point? Things like that.
Mhm.
I mean, Pier 1, we were really lucky in that we always had something different to email about. And that matters
Sure.
too. But we always, and that was the thing we did. We were very clear in the subject line about what today's sale was about. So if it's not for you, keep on scrolling. If you're set on couches and couch pillows and accessories, keep on scrolling. That's great. Maybe you want dining room stuff tomorrow. So that was one of the benefits we had with that particular brand. With clothing, your Dress Barn as well, fashion is, always changing, always new things coming out. There's, new season you got to be ready for, et cetera. So it's, definitely you want to make sure you're not just sending to send and just sending the same old tired things. But if you do have a very wide product selection, if you have new things coming out all the time, I mean, it can make sense to send very, very aggressively up to and including once per day to people, maybe even more than that with automations and things sometimes.
Nice.
I got a question for you on something that maybe you can clear up. So you're mentioning sort of spam rate, and I'm imagining you're looking at the direct spam rate data, not something like a Google Postmaster tools. How do those sort of differ within like how it affects your domain reputation and such when you're following both, right?
Yeah, I will say I always look at both because, for Google, the only way you can see that complaint rate is to go into Google Postmaster tools. I've also helped numerous email platforms configure their feedback ID header to make sure they're getting maximum value data out of the feedback header mechanism that Google provides, because you can subdivide the domains, a domain or subdomain's complaint rate even further. You can either populate list variable IDs, but I generally look at both. But typically what I do is, Google is the majority of most consumer senders lists. But what I'll say is spam complaint rate, honestly, is the ultimate fallback system for every spam filter. It's basically, the complaint-based system. It's like the complaint department. So it's ungameable. If you are driving complaints, it's ungameable. But I would say, really Microsoft complaints, Yahoo complaints, Google complaints, they all affect you at those different mailbox providers. There's no way spam complaints don't affect your reputation.
Totally right. I don't know. I'm mixing unsubscribe and spam complaints. Spam complaints, the only way you're looking at that is let's say from Google Postmaster tools. But at that same time, my understanding of that is like if you send 100,000 emails, they might take a cohort of like 1,000 in there somewhere, and then they're looking at the spam complaint rate off of that small sort of like a cohort, which could be higher than even the whole send or that volume for that day. I don't look at it as like 100% accurate, right?
No, that 1,000%. So actually, stated in Postmaster tools, how they do it is they only count emails they landed in the inbox. So typically, the way that I typically triangulate on it, like post facto, is I'll look at DMARC data and go, how much data did I inbox to Google from this asset that registered, let's say, a 0.2 complaint rate. And then I will say then I'll basically project like a range of, okay, this could be up to this many number of complaints, or it could be, if I think I inboxed only 50%, that it's half of those complaints, because they don't count emails that land in the spam folder. Because if it's already in spam, it's impossible to complain spam on it. So they don't put that in the denominator So that's why you have to look at it. But yeah, you can never know your true number of complaints. And that's by design in Postmaster tools. Google very much, they think it's a violate. The reason they don't have a traditional feedback loop is they think it's a violation of their users' privacy to tell the sender that they marked the email as spam. And then they've designed Google Postmaster tools so it actually won't serve up data points at really low volume levels or at really low. Basically, Google will redact that data point if they think there's a chance you could use it to reverse identify someone or identify too much about how the filter works. But yeah, what I would say is I typically proxy with Google and Yahoo, like or with Hotmail and Yahoo. So what I'll do is I'll go, okay, my unsubscribe rate at Yahoo is, say if I have a complaint rate problem, it's like 0.5% and my complaint rate is 0.2%. Then I'll look at Hotmail and go, okay, my unsubscribe rate is 0.6%, my complaint rate's 0.2%. Then if I go to Google and I can see, because I know the unsubscribe rate, right? So I see, okay, my unsubscribe rate and my unsubscribe volume is this much. And I know there's generally this relationship between complaints and unsubscribes. I can kind of impute the number of complaints that I got. And to really determine if it's a problem. Because what I'll say is too, that Postmaster tools can be a little misleading. If you register a high level of complaints on a day you didn't really send much email, those could be what I call like holdover complaints. It's like you sent the email on Friday, but Joshua didn't open it until Saturday. And then he decided he really didn't like it, marked it spam. Then, that complaint registers on Saturday. You guys didn't send a campaign on Saturday. So now your complaint rate's like crazy. So what I've noticed is Google will not degrade your reputation over high rate days, but that would represent a very low volume. Because that's basically how I assess that process I was talking about, looking at the DMARC data and projecting the range. That's how I assess, is this a problem, right? If it's if it would be less than 10 or 20 complaints, if I'm on a high volume multi-million sender, I'm like, nah, that's probably not going to be a problem. But if it's like, oh, shoot, this represents like 1,000 to 5,000 complaints. Now I got to really dig in and I got to go, okay, I got to dig in deeper, because being efficient with deliverability is super important, because there are 1,001 rabbit holes to go down and waste your time. I have tried at least 999 of them.
Let's talk about this deliverability crisis that nobody's talking about. So on previous conversations, you mentioned platforms like ActiveCampaign haven't been able to inbox in Hotmail for like 5 years.
I can't say that. Well, all right, allegedly. I can't say that directly, but I will say I've had numerous people that are on their shared IPs come to me and they're just not inboxing at Hotmail. Yeah. And Hotmail, typically they put a lot of priority on the IP addresses.
Okay. Other thing, MTAs
I would say Hotmail, yes, for the last 5 years plus has been the problem child for people. Yeah. For sure.
New features haven't really come out on popular MTAs. SendGrid, for example, hasn't had a lot of big facelifts in a while. Meanwhile, e-commerce brands are paying a lot of money for infrastructure that is essentially outdated, let's say broken insofar as like if you can't land an email on Hotmail, it's not working. What would you say are the top 3 deliverability problems that are kind of like secretly killing e-commerce email revenue right now? And what do you think they could do about it?
Oh man, that's hard that I have to pick just 3. That's really hard to pick. All right. Oh, sweet. Okay, that makes it a lot easier. I can definitely say, no, honest one silent one that's killing a lot of revenue is not having your email collection endpoints secured. Basically bots. I've seen bots come in and just wreck reputations, because effectively they're using your domain and your like whatever account, wherever you're signed up, they're leveraging it as part of a vector for a cyber attack. And when a lot of people complain on those emails because they realized they were related to a breach, I would say this, one of my pro tips just as all individuals, if you start getting a bunch of welcome emails you didn't sign up for, lock your credit cards, lock your credit, lock your financial accounts, you are about to be compromised. I've seen it happen in like real time in 30 minutes. Like somebody's like, I'm getting all these emails. And then they're like, why would somebody do this? And I'm like, because they're trying to create chaos in your inbox so that you don't notice important like notifications like from your bank. So yeah, if your leverage is part of a cyber attack and you generate a bunch of complaints, then Google's going to drop your reputation on its head, because they take a very dim view of that. They say it's incumbent upon the sender. And I would say this, that's the biggest crisis in deliverability and email in general is the mailbox providers are like, yo, these are our sandboxes. If you want to play in them, you got to follow our rules or we're going to throw you out of the sandbox. And that's really what, I think a lot of senders, they're like just thinking from inside the context of their business, but email's an ecosystem. You've got to think about where do you sit in the ecosystem. So cybersecurity is a big issue. Content construction, my kingdom for people to use better content construction. Like you cannot send these large print flyer style emails. That just doesn't fly anymore, especially not at Google. Because if you think about it, they're building these AI systems, and there's two reasons that they really probably don't like these just nothing but image emails. A, there's not as much for AI to sink its teeth into unless you're putting super verbose alt text in there, because reading an image with AI is computationally very expensive. So they are not going to do that on their email server because they receive like a hojillion billion emails every single minute of every day. And so then, you're taking up server space, and then you have these super fat images that are taking up like server space, like if anybody opens them. And like, if they notice people are just popping into your email and jumping right back out, they don't want to store 2 megabytes or 3 megabytes or even 1 megabyte worth of images, maybe 1 megabyte you can get away with, like all told. But basically, if you're not upsetting the AI, like Google's infrastructure, you're going to have a difficult time inboxing. So, there needs to be sufficient verbosity of the text in the email and the HTML code. And you need to have not all the content bound up in the images. And you need to make sure your images are very lightweight, because also most people, my time at Validity, I saw like 60% or more of people are opening on mobile at most of the major brands throughout the world, like lots of Fortune, 25s, they're opening their subscribers are opening primarily on mobile. And mobile people, we've all been there, where your internet connection is just not great. And, so then the images have to load on that not great connection. And if they're not optimized lightweight to load on mobile, you're increasing the risk. People go to all the trouble. You do everything. People go to all the trouble of opening your email after you went to all the trouble of buying a platform to send it from, hiring people to construct the email, schedule the email, all of this, everything you had to do is wasted when that image doesn't load and somebody goes, crappy tech, and bounces out. Because they, in the age of TikTok, attention spans are so short. Literally, I think like half a second. Like a read on an email, a good long read on an email is 8 seconds. So that's the time scales we're playing with here. Like, a solid 2 to like 6 seconds is considered a skim. Somebody skimmed through the email. So, really, you got to think about how things load on mobile device. You need to be thinking mobile device first.
In that realm too, the age of TikTok, funny you say it, but it's true. And I know email is trying to play in the game of interactivity with AMP and whatnot. What is your experiences with that, and how that sort of like plays into the optimization of email and or interactivity of email, right? And where things are going.
I think it's absolutely the direction. I still think it's the direction things are headed. I think it was way ahead of its time, to be really honest, when it did drop. And it's used extensively on mobile web pages. Like it's used quite a lot there. I think ESP adoption has been really slow, because to be fair, a lot of I think its flagging adoption is a symptom of how nobody is winning in the ESP marketplace. Nobody has just come and just killed the game, because AMP is difficult. There are some hoops you need to jump through. You've got to get like registered with Google. You've got to show you can send that. So most people that are still just trying to get emails out on time, they don't have time to hire basically a whole software developer to develop apps inside an email. So now we're seeing some drag and drop editors come out. I think that's really promising. But I would say, really, if you're looking to get your engagement to another level, I would go with AMP, especially if you're heavily Gmail dependent, because that is where it works most reliably. For sure, I would. I think it's worth investing in with a good drag and drop editor. I don't think it's worth most brands' time to hire a whole AMP developer for email.
Yeah, I think you're very right that it's before its time, or it's a bad name and people don't know what it does or something. Because last year I went to a couple different like iGaming conferences, and I was like, this is going to be great. Like we were ready to sort of like move into AMP, do interactive games, place your bets even like right through your email and different things, right? And in the conversations I had, it immediately felt overwhelming to almost everyone. Like this isn't something I'm that interested in. Maybe because it's the one-to-one connect the dots doesn't sort of like line up. but I thought that was super interesting. And maybe, I don't know what adoption has to happen first. Maybe like more interactive emails in your inbox first. And then you're like, oh, you can do these things. And then that line becomes smaller, right, between the dots. But I just found it super interesting. And I think it's still in that, hasn't made too many big waves since a year even.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, it's been around like a lot longer. I think the big thing is, I think people are still too overwhelmed by email in general. And I think that's what I think it is. I think people are still, they're like, this is like a new nice to have for most people. It's not a must have. Like, send the email, hit the inbox is the must have. But I mean, I'll tell you this, there are people that aren't even worrying about hitting the inbox. I have seen more big name brands than you want to even know about.
If it's promotion,
that
spam,
yeah.
spam even.
I mean, sometimes not even paying attention if it's bouncing off of a particular mailbox provider. Like, I'm just saying, like, there are so many people out there still just trying to get the email out the door. And I think that's where there's a real opportunity for a software company to come in and make that a whole lot easier. Because I just think there's so many checks that could be automated. I think, there need to be, it's not, I think marketers have been drugged into the role of having to almost need like a PhD in computer science just to send an email. And I don't think it has to be like that. I think there's a real opportunity.
The provider black box is like something unique in the space, right? Like, every provider has their own sort of parameters in which you're sort of like trying to reverse engineer.
Yeah. I honestly, for me, coming from the background of, formerly being a chef, it's not that surprising because, the answer that, if a chef asks you, you step into a new job and the chef's like, how do you make hollandaise sauce? The correct answer is always, I don't know, chef. How do you make hollandaise sauce at, XYZ restaurant that I just got a job at? That's the right answer, is how do you make it here? And that's really what the different mailbox provider. What else? Historically, Hotmail and Yahoo, AOL, they've been around quite a long time. And I think Google kind of they benefited from a real like second mover advantage of looking around in the space and going, okay, those guys are doing it this way that's like super resource intensive, and it's really easy to game because it's really easy for people to get new IPs if you filter first based on IPs. So they just from the jump said, we're going to start from a domain model. And I think Google has found ways to mine lots of valuable data. Like, they tend not to reject as much mail at the gate as most of the other mailbox providers. That was actually an interesting insight we were talking about at MailCon. Was despite the fact that, all these changes got announced in October of 2023 or September, then they, came into force, in February of 24, and then another level of enforcement in June of 2024. And then we said, even now, so it's been at maturity. The funny thing is, and Microsoft announced much later, just a few months back. And the funny thing is, they were actually enforcing DMARC failures and rejecting them more stringently than either of the two providers that had announced it before them. They were actually, but I think part of that is that Microsoft, the challenge they're really trying to solve is, how do we run this Hotmail infrastructure as cheaply as possible? Because I definitely noticed, like, big, heavy image emails, they won't inbox at Hotmail, they'll inbox just fine at Office 365 because people are paying for that storage to exist. Versus the free mail accounts, that's just there. They delete spam after 10 days. Google holds on to it for 30. I think Yahoo does as well. Google or Hotmail clear out, Microsoft, on their free mail, they clear out junk in like 10 days. So, they're really storing that for a fraction of time.
Image compression, alt text, those sorts of things is like an optimal sort of sending deal on the ESP side. It's also interesting though that like a Hotmail or something wouldn't do the compression on their end. Like, they just like force compress, right? For like lower storage. Yeah.
I mean, and maybe they do, but it's so much easier. Again, the way they look at it is their sandbox.
That's work.
They're like, they're like, that's work they could make the senders
money.
do. Yeah. They could, they could also just go, I'm just gonna reject it if it's too fat. I don't like it. So, like, senders, fix your stuff. I mean, but that's the thing. That's the world we live in. Like I said, it doesn't necessarily have to be a black box, because when you discuss in cybersecurity, when you get too wide and open about how you discuss TTP, tactics, techniques, and procedures, then people start to reverse engineer it. So I completely understand why they keep that very close to the best. And frankly, I would say, Google, they've got a lot of machine learning built up in their filter. I think that was another part of their second mover advantage. So, and I think they're also constantly testing numerous different versions of the filter, optimizing for some, I'm sure they've found out what I read this really interesting article ages ago called The Lime Number. There's this guy who was a serial entrepreneur. He'd done a bunch of different ventures from like, a bar to like then running a software company. And he said he always finds his like Lime Number. He figured it out at the bar to figure out if, how things were, they always, even if a bartender was like cheating, like pocketing the money or giving people drinks for free to get bigger tips, like whatever, the number of limes consumed was always consistent with sales, like basically. So if that ratio was off, he knew, and it was his secret number that nobody else at the bar like knew about. And then he said when he went to like the software company, he found a new Lime number, which was going into Google admin settings and watching like the send receive on people's email accounts. And if he saw there was like not a lot of activity on his sales team, somebody in the sales team, he'd pull him in and have a conversation with him and say, hey man, how's it going? Do you need a break? Like what's going on here? So, it's always having this like kind of way to like judge it. So I think Google has some Lime number of like customer satisfaction and the intersection of customer satisfaction, their business goals, because their goal, all the mailbox providers' goals are to keep eyeballs like in that mailbox provider. Like that's what they're optimizing for the most part. And if people have a bad experience with email because they get hacked, because they get a bunch of irrelevant crap that wastes their time, like if any of those things happen, you lose eyeballs.
Yep, makes sense.
You guys were both at a conference recently, right? Let's do a lightning round here. What were 3 things you found surprising or you learned at their most recent conference? Elby, I'll start with you.
Gosh, I'm having to think here. Did I learn anything? So I'm trying to think if I learned anything. Actually, yeah. The surprising thing, one of the talks of it was Microsoft's infrastructure. I think this is again a resourcing constraint. It seems like their DNS lookups, whatever tech runs that, is having some issues. And because it was a big DMARC vendor, I think it was Valley Mail, did a look through all their data and saw that of like all the temporary DKIM fails reported in DKIM or in DMARC reporting across their platform, 90% were with Microsoft, and they were not failing at other providers. And I've seen this too. So it seems like they're timing out when doing the DNS lookup. So actually, even in Microsoft's own guidance, it says to set the TTL, I think, to like on DNS records, the time to live, how long, before they should requery, to 3,600 seconds, which I think is like 8 minutes or something like that. And then, no, I did that math wrong, but I think it's like 15 minutes. But what I found is if you set it to 24 hours, you experience a lot less failure. So that is like the new kind of shocking guidance that I have. And it's not, it's very counterintuitive. At least it's very counterintuitive, especially considering it's like against their documentation. But I've had a few clients deploy it, and it does seem to be helping those that were experiencing issues. Typically only higher volume senders, smaller guys I'm not seeing get as hit by this. But yeah, that's one of the things. So extending the TTLs. And I think it makes sense. Like if you're not changing your records like rapidly all the time, for email, I think it's fine to leave it like that. You just might want to set it lower if you make a change, like lower it for a little while. But yeah, there's like some strategy there. Trying to think if there was anything else shocking that I don't know. Let's maybe trade off. I'll trade off. See if Trevor has like one shocking thing while I think of another.
Yeah, like I think I live in sort of macro land, but like I had a lot of conversations with data, mining types of companies, which I think have been around for a long time. But with the introduction of AI, it does seem as though they're trying to find new ways into the market, right? Like I think that they're still selling a lot of data and a lot of people are using a lot of data, but the access to data has gotten so easy that they all sort of seem to be trying to find new footing is what I've seen, right?
Makes sense. I would say, I guess the other thing that I've seen is like in the industry. Well, this wasn't at MailCon. This story broke afterwards, but I think Yotpo shutting down. Lots of folks, they're shutting down their email and SMS service because I worked with them in the past on clients. We never used the email sending. We just used, we triggered all the sends through our Klaviyo. We just used the like part where you're trying to collect the user generated content, the reviews and everything like that. But yeah, they built an email service and now they're shutting it down. I think it's horrible because it's like right before Black Friday, Cyber Monday. So there's a lot of people that are going to be scrambling to find a new platform, get warmed up in time. I do not envy those folks. And yeah, I probably will end up helping a few of them to get warmed up, because that maximum velocity warm-ups are like my specialty. Well, maximum velocity and reliability, because you can't, there's just a certain amount, like I said, it's the mailbox provider sandbox. I can't push them to accept things they don't want to accept.
Yeah. Another thing, and maybe you have some thoughts on this, but I had a decent number of conversations with very large volume senders post MailCon into the ASE conference where, medium high risk types of lead gen primary focused senders, right? And a lot of them are struggling seemingly in the last year or since these sort of like authentication changes have happened and stricter, compliances and rules and such. I've also seen a couple people mention like they're kind of like going back and forth between SMS and email as well. And SMS has a different set of sort of problems, but that less so in the last year as email, right? I'm sort of curious what you've seen in that realm and how people have still been able to sort of like be successful, or what you've seen in patterns that the same type of people that are sending these sorts of large volumes in the more lead gen area.
Yeah. So what I will say is I've seen some limited folks be successful. The folks that really enhance their data and really take the time to know who they're emailing well and making sure what the key thing is relevance. That is the hardest thing,
Can't be lazy anymore, huh?
Yeah, that's and here's what I'll say is what I see is the predictable outcome of the changes that they made, because basically forcing people to have DMARC, forcing them to align either SPF or DKIM, what that does is that very firmly associates the traffic with your domain, with your brand. Actually, one of the bigger things that I think this can be like my piggybacking off what you said, I think the third kind of big thing that I've noticed, really maybe not as much talking about, just MailCon, but over the course has been, if you're not emailing from the domain that also, or a subdomain of the domain that carries the majority of your web traffic, you're going to have problems because it looks really weird to the spam filter. Especially think about it. We're seeing a lot of stuff coming out in the DOJ, findings with Google, how Google's design documents that are having to get revealed. And we're even finding out that some of the things they've said, like they're talking, their faces, talking heads have said, oh, no, we don't use Chrome data in the SEO algorithm. No, it's in the design docs. They absolutely do. So I think folks are crazy if they think Google doesn't use some of the SEO data in the email algorithm, because they eat everything. And it's just a question of how they weight it. And those weights are constantly shifting. So, I can say, one of the things that's weighted in the spam filter is spam house listings. That's weighted very heavily. If you're listed on spam house, you're going in the spam folder at Gmail and you're getting outright blocked at Microsoft. But yeah, that's, I think the main thing, is people we're centralizing around the domain, the website identity, and people are getting pushed out. And that's absolutely the goal. I always tell people this: Google does not have, like, the spam filters are primarily Google. They don't have to make it impossible for you to get any email volume through. They just have to make it unscalable and therefore unprofitable. They just have to make it more work. And that's exactly what they're trying to do, because cybersecurity at the highest levels, it's a resource war. It's a battle. Yeah. Like, hackers are trying to steal as many resources as they can to leverage as many attacks as they can, because they get, they compromise servers. They don't do this on their own servers. I mean, they don't have servers unless they steal them from somebody, steal their server accounts in time. And so, it's a resource war. And if Google is able to increase the amount of resources you have to invest to be successful in getting around the filter. So what I'll say is this: is what you're sending people relevant, and does it delight them? Because I've seen people send, like, I had a client once that was sending, kids fundraiser stuff. And it was like, the kids gave them the list of emails and things like that, but they were nominally, those people didn't opt in. Auntie and uncle didn't opt in. Little Jimmy opted in for them. And they had a high complaint rate, but they also had insanely high opens and clicks, and Google was fine with it.
Yeah, it's interesting because the one-to-one on the sort of like SEO front, or like the optimization on, we talked about this a little bit, but like on the website side of things, and I know Google's been pushing it for a long time, like page load speeds and the right schema and the markup, whatever. And you've seen it like sort of get more and more prevalent. And the interesting thing is, I'm sure it is one-to-one in some regard to email. However, in the web space, it was all, like, more or less until recently, it was all owned by like Google and search engines and the ad network on top of it and all of that. Whereas email is sort of like your own owned channel, right? In which they're trying to balance that, but they don't have quite the like stronghold on, right? It's more like it's more stuff that I'm trying to like connect dots to on like how one-to-one is it, right? But it does make sense, like faster email sort of like loads or lower amount of data it requires, I guess, like within images, and same with like sort of the markup on the alt text and those sorts of things, right? There was, remember the old like top of the page always matters thing?
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, even that sort of like, depending upon where you are, what type of industry you're in, the type of emails you're sending, adding the unsubscribe to the top, same kind of game, right?
Always
Definitely
better
interesting.
than always better than a spam complaint. And that's what, so here's the thing, what I would say is, what I've seen in the Google filter is if you put up the engagement numbers, if you basically put up the kind of engagement numbers that show Gmail that people like what you're sending them, you're not gonna have any problems. Doesn't really matter like how the contacts got there. Right? The thing is, how the contacts got there generally has a strong determinant on the metrics you get. Are people expecting to receive what you send them? Do they find it relevant? Those are the like important questions and to kind of answer and see if you're going to be successful. But no, I mean, I definitely have seen, and we saw this numerous months ago as well, prior to even anything being announced. I had a number of senders, some of them in the affiliate space come and say that like they had been pushed out. And I mean, this is, I think, the evolution of the filter. And it's like, if you're sending relevant offers that people actually want, you will be successful in the ecosystem. If you are sending people largely things that are irrelevant, and I'll say this, Google always wants to filter down to, they want to customize the filter down to the level of each individual recipient, because that's the other thing too. Like, even I can proxy things with inbox tests and stuff like that. But even if my inbox test shows 100% promotion folder placement, I, as the consultant, logically know, no, they're probably hitting primary tab for their like core fans. Like for people that are their core brand fans, you're probably hitting that primary tab, because if somebody opens every email or they dragged it to the primary tab, you're going to hit primary tab. What the filter, what the inbox test really try to find out is what is like the neutral state of the filter. And that really matters for the first ever email. Whenever I come in to look at a new system, a new client sending, the first thing I look at is how is your welcome series doing, or whatever your very first email touch point is with someone. How is that doing? Because if that has problems, then there's, that
everything else does.
Yeah. Well, and also it depends on like, you'll see the problem. Well, actually, you'll see the problems there first. You'll see that if you have reputational problems, you will see them on the front end first of not being able to reach brand new subscribers. That's a sign that the general state of the filter has turned against you.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Let's talk about list bombs and then wrap up.
Sure thing.
All right. So first, what is a list bomb?
Gotcha. It's I also call it a flooding attack. It's basically when a hacker points their bot that will read the form in the browser programmatically, identify all the fields, and programmatically do HTTP posts to submit data to that. Like, so they'll do it all programmatically. And I've got a super easy tactic that every e-com out there can use, which is put a hidden field on your form that is hidden in the code. So it's not visible when I look at it, like in, on the web page, but the robots will see it and they will fill it out. And then you can filter out the robots. Like, so just put some random inane question on there. What was the name of your first dog? Like whatever. And if you get any answer in there, because the bots, I've seen some crazy stuff come through with like list bombs. Like one of them, one client I had, they were like e-commerce. They were selling, gosh, I don't even remember. They didn't have a huge variety of products. They had like a limited set of products across. They were supplements. They were another supplements brand, and they started getting list bombed, and like the names coming through were really weird, like devil, evil. They also had a lot of numbers in them. So we actually the client actually even created on the welcome journey a filter step beforehand to filter out anybody who had a number in their first or last name. And that actually caught like 80% of the trash that was coming through, but there was still about a 20% we couldn't that wouldn't filter by that rule. So we thankfully were able to trace down the endpoint and get it locked down. It was just something that got left open from a trial. But it's where a programmer shoves a bunch of emails through a web form they know is going to trigger an autoresponder. And typically, if they're trying to crack me, they're going to fire my email like 100 different forms. So I just get a ton of emails.
So what's the risk if somebody doesn't catch that they're getting list bombed? What could happen to to their email.
It could drag your whole reputation down. Like I've seen it happen. The
Yeah.
client that I had, it caused, so just this one issue that was a fairly low volume affecting their welcome email caused their whole parent domain to drop from high to medium. And that's when it dropped from high to medium, that's when I was like, oh, crap, there's a problem here. Where's it going? And I look at the campaigns look fine. Open rates are fine. At Gmail, everything's fine. I'm like, okay, then next step, go look at the, so I look at where the bulk of the volume is coming out of, didn't see a problem there. So I looked at the welcome email, and sure enough, I see like crazy names like Devil Evil, like a bunch of names with numbers that, first name, last name got numbers in it. And I'll say this, that's one thing in email I think a lot of people lose sight of. We try to look at everything statistically. Sometimes there is just no substitute for going and looking at a few of the records, experiencing whatever behavior, and trying to like backtrack, what happened here? Like, how did this person end up unsubscribed?
Have you tracked down most of the reasons why? Like, are these like competitors trying to bog your system down? Are these like people that have it out for you? Or like, what's the why?
Well, the why is hackers. Typically, it precedes a financial account compromise. So, for example, if let's say they have my bank credential, like they think they have the username and password to log into my bank account. They know my bank is going to send me an email like, hey, did you log on from Shanghai, China? Hey, did you mean to transfer all your money to this bank in the Cayman Islands? They know the bank is going to send certain of those emails. So they're essentially trying to just create absolute chaos. I mean, they might even, if they can, list bomb up an individual, or if they can fill up and flood, from the individual recipient, if they can flood my inbox enough, they might even be able to get me to mailbox full. So I don't even get the bank notifications when they come through. So, but typically this precedes a hacker trying to financially compromise an individual recipient. Because even though it's sending from your system, they're also leveraging 100 or 1,000 other people's web forms to do the exact same thing. But it's because they used to they would send the emails themselves. But with filtering, like obviously hackers cannot maintain like high reputation systems that are capable of inboxing. And if it all goes to spam,
so
that doesn't create the desired effect.
And I'm not saying you're wrong. Like it makes a lot of sense, but your belief is like in any business who sort of has like, generally speaking, an uptick in like spam type signups or even subscribers, but these are all sort of similar vein, right? But like
it is usually opportunistic. I will say I did once see a political sender, a whole agency actually, they were being targeted attacked. They were being in the political realm. I do see that. I actually had a medical college. It wasn't a list bomb. They were being attacked with a backscatter attack off their DMARC reject policy. And that was a targeted attack. Most hacking is not targeted. Most of it is just purely opportunistic. Where do I see an opening? Where can I get in? Here's the thing you got to think. Hackers are very lazy. And I think hopefully they won't come for my head for that. Because honestly, the best programmers are lazy. You're going to try to find an easier way to do it. So, they're going to use other people's infrastructure. They're not going to use, everything's cheaper if you don't pay the bill. So, that's kind of really part of it. They're usually going to do a lot more opportunistic. Like I said, I have seen some targeted attacks. Some of those I'm able to help with. Others I decide to fall back. I'm like, okay, I have to escalate this to another professional. I will say, if you want to have somebody on to talk about hacking, I can happily get my mentor over here, Kevin McGrail. He's been filtering spam for the last 21 plus years. I'm working in the Apache Spam Assassin project. Hopefully you guys edit that and don't show me. So we'll send him the bloopers reel of me saying it wrong. Yeah, like that, it's, he can go into probably more of the reasons why, but most of what I see is the opportunistic stuff.
I think you're probably right. Like I've seen in the e-commerce space, people who do business, let's say in the US, have mirrored sites in other parts of the world in which they're trying to act as them to collect. Right. And then there's sort of targets off of that. But yeah, go ahead. We can wrap up.
Yeah, I do. I actually 3 minutes late I gotta go.
Let's do it.
I don't know where that came from.
Yeah, it's all good. We keep doing that to you today. Thanks.
No, it's okay.
Albie.
I'm super happy to be with you guys. Yeah, I had a great combo with that other partner as well, so that was good.
Cool.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys for having me. It was so much fun.
Have a good rest of the day.
I'll talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.